How does a single idea, just a spark, turn into an institution that lasts for millennia? Going from a single message to a global movement, that's the journey we're diving into today, looking at one of the most powerful examples in all of history.
You know, this is the real test for any movement, right? An idea can be totally revolutionary, but what happens when the founder's gone? So often, it just fizzles out. So what's the secret sauce? How do you turn a shared memory into a lasting institution, one that's strong enough to outlive every single person who was there at the very beginning?
All right, so let's rewind to the very beginning. After the big proclamation, the resurrection, you might expect the followers to just scatter. But that's not what happened. Something pretty incredible happened instead. They all came together in Jerusalem and formed a real organized community. And that was the first massive step, taking a shared moment and turning it into something that could actually last.
And this is a really crucial point to get. This group, they didn't think they were starting some brand new religion. Nope. They saw themselves as a movement inside the Judaism of their time. The thing that set them apart was this incredibly powerful shared memory and their unique take on everything they'd just seen.
But just having a shared memory, well, that's not enough to keep things going. To actually make it through the day-to-day, you've got to build something solid, an institution. And that means structure, routines, real practices. So let's dig into exactly how this first community pulled that off.
It turns out their whole community life was built on three main pillars. First up, organized teaching. You got to have a consistent way to pass the message on, right? Second, common prayer. This was all about reinforcing that shared identity, who they were as a group. And third, and this one is so important, material solidarity. I mean, they were actually supporting each other with money, with resources. It wasn't just talk. It was a total all-in commitment.
And you can see how it all connects, right? The shared interpretation, that becomes the organized teaching. The shared memory, that's what gets reinforced through common prayer. And that shared commitment, well, that becomes real, tangible support for one another, material solidarity. The big takeaway here is how they took these abstract beliefs and turned them into real, everyday actions. That's the stuff that gives a movement real staying power.
Okay, but of course it wasn't all smooth sailing. I mean, not by a long shot. Just like any new movement, this community immediately started facing these huge tests that could have ripped it apart, coming from the outside and, maybe even more dangerously, from the inside.
So from the outside, you had the big one, persecution from the authorities, who pretty much saw them as a threat. But honestly, the debates happening inside the group were probably even more of a risk. You had these major disagreements about their core identity, like who are we, really, who gets to belong, and how? Those are the kinds of questions that can completely tear a movement apart from the inside out. And this is where the story takes a really interesting turn. It's a total paradox, actually, because that internal crisis, that huge debate over who they were and who could join, it didn't break them. In fact, it ended up being the very thing that pushed them to expand. It all boiled down to this one fundamental question, and you can really see it play out with the figure of Paul. The question was, if this message is for everyone, does that mean new members from totally different cultures have to follow all the local, ancestral Jewish laws to be a part of it? Or could the very definition of what it means to belong change?
So the first model, the one based in Jerusalem, was pretty specific. Belonging was totally tied to certain ethnic and legal traditions, things passed down for generations. Now, that was great for keeping a really strong, tight-knit identity, but it also put a hard limit on how far the movement could grow. It couldn't easily cross those cultural borders. But then you have Paul, who came in with a completely different vision. He argued that what really mattered, what made you belong, was the shared proclamation itself, not a checklist of ancestral rules. And this was, absolutely revolutionary. It basically uncoupled belonging from a specific ethnicity, which threw the doors wide open for the movement to spread across all these different cultures throughout the Roman Empire.
And that's what we mean when we talk about expansion. It wasn't just a few people hopping on a boat and traveling. No, this was a fundamental change to the movement's entire structure and its culture. It went from being this one single community in Jerusalem to a whole network of diverse groups scattered all across the Mediterranean, all connected by that same core message, but living it out in totally different ways. So that brings us right back to where we started. This whole story really highlights this core tension, doesn't it? What is it that makes an institution actually last? Is it holding on tight to the original rigid rules? Or is it having the courage to adapt, to redefine what it means to belong when the world changes? What truly makes an idea last?